A post-Christmas version of the Pick Six. The Packers keep their playoff hopes alive, and hopefully some coal in Joe Barry's stocking. Let's go. A special edition of the Pick Six, as some said it might have been last week. I am your host this week. I am Jacob Westendorf. I'm not joined by Brendan Dworzinski. He has left me all alone like a wide receiver in the middle of a Joe Barry zone defense. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am happy to be back after a week off where I had to do the company Christmas party nonsense. I don't know that they realized that they shouldn't be scheduling things like that during my show, but they did. So here I am. I don't have Brendan Dworzinski today. If I find out that he is driving back from Illinois, he said he was driving back. He did not say from where. If I find out he was driving back from Illinois, I'm going to be very, very upset with him. But that's not where we're at right now. Where we are at is 7-8 for the Green Bay Packers. They win 33-30 over the Carolina Panthers. 33-30 is interesting to say the very least. Allowing 30 points to Carolina was hilarious and unacceptable, and it very easily could have been much, much more. But that's where we're at for the time being, and Green Bay does win. And I said after the game that the ending was ridiculous and that there's no such thing as a quote-unquote bad win. But it's hard to feel any warm and fuzzies coming out of that performance. And I want to start there because I've been pretty vocal on the side of a lot of different things in terms of the coordinator and whether or not he should be employed or not. So let's start with Joe Barry because that is the conversation that takes place. True North Packer fan. That's a really good question. List one thing the defense does well that should save Joe Barry's job. Nothing. They don't rush the passer. They have Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Preston Smith had a good game. Kenny Clark, but they don't rush the passer with consistency. They don't defend the pass. They don't stop the run. I know they played well against the run on Sunday against Carolina, but there's nothing they do well, and most units, defenses have one redeeming quality, and this team does not have that. And they haven't had that, and they haven't had that for really 3 years under Joe Barry. They don't take the ball away. Like that 2011 Packers defense, for example, was terrible. But they did take the ball away. They at least got interceptions, takeaways. This team doesn't do that. Kyle Hamilton last night has more interceptions than Green Bay has in a month. Pretty sure that's accurate, which is incredible that that's the case. But they don't do anything to put pressure on opposing offenses, and they allow everything to be dictated to them. And that's been one of the fair criticisms of this team for 3 years, if not longer. That could range back to Mike Pettin. Now, I've also said before, I think that the issues with this team defensively extend beyond the coordinator. I don't think that just changing the coordinator would fix everything. I think there's a culture shock, a culture change. The popular video that's going around now is Mike Zimmer talking about his return into coaching and how he was ready for Aaron Rodgers to leave the North, and he didn't think that he would leave the North after Zimmer did. I'll say this: Mike Zimmer would be different than what Joe Barry and even Mike Pettin are. There's some stories about Mike Zimmer that are wild. And I'm not trust me broing or anything like that. Tyler Dunn wrote a story on the Vikings and the culture change and everything that's come with Kevin O'Connell. And sometimes it's time. I'm not saying there's anything crazy wrong with Zimmer if he could dial it back a little bit, but there is some old school to him, and maybe old school to the point where some might call it abusive. So I'm interested to see where that lays out. But my take the whole time has been that firing him now doesn't serve a purpose other than Twitter getting a scalp that they so desperately crave. Nobody loves to get a coach fired quite like the internet does. And that is how I've kind of felt the whole season. You know, like when they played 3 games and everyone's like, oh, fire him now. It's like, well, they're not going to fire the coordinator after 3 games. If they did that, then that says a lot about a bunch of other stuff. Here's the issue now is when you give up 30 points to the Carolina Panthers, this is the worst team in the NFL by a decent margin. This is the worst offense in the NFL. Bryce Young has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Their receivers are journeymen. They did not run the ball against you. They're not good protecting the passer, and they still did that pretty well on Sunday. And I think this has been talked about a bunch, but the most damning thing of all was, think about it. If Matt LaFleur waits until, what if he calls that timeout 1 second earlier before the Anders Carlson field goal? Then Carolina has a chance to kick a game-winning field goal, and the game really does come down to a coin flip, because do you really think Green Bay's defense is going to get a stop if Carolina were to get the ball first? Like, something, I understand there's weird bounces of the ball, and the way that football is very different, but that is incredible to me that they were literally 1 second away from having a chance to tie the game. You know, my guy True North has the Packers. Bryce Young's rating against the Packers, 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I made the joke that those were Bryce Young's first 2 touchdown passes since the Obama administration. Maybe not quite that long, but the last time that he threw a touchdown pass, we hadn't eaten Thanksgiving dinner yet as a society. That, to me, the worry that my friend Mike Kawano had about them potentially retaining Joe Barry was these last 3 games. The Packers are going to face Bryce Young, which they already did, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, name your Vikings quarterback, and Justin Fields. The chance for that, Mike calls it a dead cat bounce, to rebound to end the season, kind of like what they did last year, quite frankly. The defense last year, they gave up like 360 yards rushing to Philadelphia. And then after the game, Matt LaFleur was asked if he was considering changing the defensive coordinator, and he looked surprised by the question, which is still asinine to me that he was surprised by when you give up 360 yards rushing, any question is a fair one, in my opinion. But the next 4 games, they played like bad quarterbacks and Kirk Cousins to finish the season, and played okay. Played well in some games, but they got a lot of takeaways against some bad quarterbacks, and were able to kind of, finesse the end of the season as quote unquote we finished strong, when really they probably just faced Baker Mayfield, who had been in Los Angeles for 20 minutes, and Tua Tagovailoa, who might have been concussed, and Kirk Cousins, who had like the worst game of the season, and so on and so forth from that year. I don't. That's out the window now. There is no dead cat bounce. You gave up 30 points to Bryce Young. And I know Bryce Young is the former number 1 overall pick. I understand all that. All that is fine. But he hasn't played like that. Like, of the quarterbacks that were drafted in this year's class, he certainly played the worst of all the ones that were picked in the first round. And that has been a season-long story for Carolina. Like, if Carolina didn't trade up to get him and had their own pick, they would be one and doneing Bryce Young. Like, Caleb Williams would be a Carolina Panther. Like, Drake May, whoever your go-to at that spot is, would be the number 1 pick in Carolina. Since they traded that pick to Chicago, now Chicago should be the team picking Caleb Williams or Drake May. And Carolina, that move can go down as an absolute all-timer, because not only did you trade away the right to draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, you also didn't draft C.J. Stroud, who was an MVP candidate at one point this season and a favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year prior to his concussion that's knocked him out of the last 2 games. So you picked the wrong quarterback and punted on the right to pick two guys really, who people really think highly of coming into this draft class as well. And Green Bay gave up 30 points and offered not a ton of resistance along the way. Like, they got, I think the highlight of the game defensively for Green Bay was the first series where they get a 3-and-out, and then Lucas Van Ness roughs the punter, which kind of a weak call, but still, what the hell, Rich Bisaccia. And then they get another 3-and-out basically right after that. And there's plenty of examples here. Tommy DeVito won NFC Offensive Player of the Week a couple weeks ago. He got benched. Baker Mayfield posts the first visiting quarterback's perfect passer rating at Lambeau Field ever. It seems like every year under Joe Barry's defense, the Packers set some kind of record that you don't want to set. Last year, it was giving up 300 some odd rushing yards to Philly. This year, it was giving up a perfect passer rating to Baker Mayfield. Like, there is no saving grace. And the saving grace a few weeks ago was points per game, which they were inching toward the top 10. Well, now they've given up 84 points in the last 3 games. And as for Soder, this is another point I want to get to, because I think it's both. Because when they hired Joe Barry, they fired Mike Patton, let him go, let his contract expire, whatever you want to call it. That's fired. To me, it's all the same. You didn't ask him to come back. They kept all of his position coaches and didn't let Barry hire any of his own. The first position coach that Joe Barry hired that was his own was this offseason when he hired Greg Williams to replace Jerry Gray. That's bass backwards. Like, that would be the equivalent of the Packers hiring Matt LaFleur and saying, well, you're keeping all of Mike McCarthy's assistants. That's insane to me. Like, if Green Bay is going to do this thing this offseason, to me, it starts with, yes, letting the head of the snake, if you will, go. But as far as I'm concerned, none of these position coaches have earned their keep beyond 2023. Maybe there's a few guys here or there that they want to say, like, yeah, I like who that guy's, but I would let whoever the new coordinator is, carte blanche, man. And this coordinator hire, in my opinion, when the Packers hired Rich Bisaccia, that was coming off of a historically terrible special teams performance, whole season worth. Rich Bisaccia was hire him hire. That is the type of hire that Green Bay needs to make a defensive coordinator. Like, oh, duh, yeah, hire him. Because they've tried a bunch of different stuff the last couple of years, and none of it's worked. They hired Patton, that didn't work. They hired Barry, obviously, that didn't work, and Barry was a hire that was, I hate to call it predictable, but it was kind of predictable that Barry's defense would fail, because it always has. And at some point, your track record follows you. Now, this will be the 7th season that Barry's defense finishes in the bottom third of the league as a defensive coordinator. 2 in Washington, 2 in Detroit, 3 in Green Bay. That should be unacceptable. And the point I was getting at the start of this whole thing is, Joe, to answer your question, if that's what they wanted, then if that's Matt's reason for hiring him, then that's a really bad one, in my opinion. But we'll never know. I think that it seems pretty clear at this point. Jim Leonard said no, and LaFleur wanted somebody with experience as a defensive coordinator, which is why Ejiro Evero is not in Green Bay currently. Would that have changed anything if it was? Who knows? We'll never know. We can go back and forth all day on stuff like that. But the point I'm getting at the beginning of this whole song and dance was, I've said before, it just gives Twitter a scalp if they fire him. That's it. I don't think that, maybe that's still true. Maybe that's all it is. The point I make, I don't care anymore. Like, there is no defending. We'll just let it go until the end of the year. I think that I don't see how he gives them the best chance to win Sunday's game against Minnesota, for example, or next Sunday's game against Chicago. There's nobody in the coaching staff to replace him, and I've said that before too. My answer to that is very childish, but it is the answer, and that's, who cares? Try one of them. Pick one. I really don't care which one. But you gave him, in my opinion, the final straw that broke the camel's back should have been last season in Philly when they gave up 1 billion yards rushing. But it wasn't. And then it should have been at the end of the year, but it wasn't. And Matt LaFleur said that he didn't anticipate a lot of coaching changes because he valued continuity almost as much as anything in this league. And that's why I have a prediction for who I think the next defensive coordinator is going to be. And I don't think it's an answer a lot of you are going to like. But he didn't do that. So the final straw now to me is it should have been, could have been, gave up perfect passer rating to Baker Mayfield at Lambeau Field. But if you really wanted to just say, it was a bad game, Baker's not awful, which he's not. Godwin and Evans are really good. Like Tampa's got some players on offense. It was just a bad day against a good offense. I don't agree, but fine. Whatever. LaFleur is asked by Bill Huber, shout out my guy Bill, whether or not Green Bay would consider a change, whether he would consider a change of defensive coordinator now. And LaFleur was like, we're not going there. I'm not going to go there. And then when asked like why, he said it's not the time for that. Okay? So you're giving him a second chance and a chance to potentially win the job for 2024. Like, I think that if Green Bay had played strong, there's a chance that Barry gets retained beyond this year. It's possible. Then they lay that egg. They're outgained by Carolina. And again, had it been for a little bit more time, they would have been outscored by Carolina, which only 2 other teams. Carolina hadn't scored a touchdown in 3 games. They scored 4 against Green Bay. Like Carolina's offense doesn't really have a redeeming quality. And Green Bay seemed to show no interest in stopping them. So to finish here, when does it flip to Matt LaFleur? I'll say this. The only reason we can have the discussion of whether Matt LaFleur should be on the hot seat is because of his defense of the defensive coordinator. And I'm not going to say like, I've seen people react and say like, if Barry's still employed today, then LaFleur can be fired as far as I'm concerned. To me, that's ridiculous because LaFleur has done a really good job this year. There was before the Giants game, you could have made an argument Matt LaFleur was in the coach of the year conversation. Now, obviously, he's not going to win it, and he doesn't deserve to with the way the season has progressed. But I do think if LaFleur keeps Barry beyond 2023 and says he's coming back next year, we're keeping all the stuff the same, blah, 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 then next year is it. Like, you have tied yourself to this defensive coordinator for whatever reason, and it's obvious the two have a relationship. They're close. They've worked together before. I'm certainly sympathetic to that. But in the words of the agent that Jay Moore plays in Jerry Maguire, whose name escapes me at the moment, it's not show friends, it's show business. And Green Bay has not been good enough on defense for really a decade. And now this is a team who wasn't supposed to need to score 30 points a game to win. Like they were supposed to play defense and run the football and play special teams complementary while they broke in their new quarterback and passing game. And now they're completely relying on this passing game. Their run game stinks. Their defense is bad. Their special teams is still a gong show. There is so much more that needs to be done to fix this. It's almost like they just unplugged Rodgers, plugged in Love, and all the same problems that accompany the Rodgers teams are now with the Love teams. And we're starting to see like anybody who was blaming Aaron Rodgers for some of the stuff that was going on, like in the other parts of the team, that was always a little ridiculous to me. But it's even more so now. Like this team's got some stuff they need to fix and desperately, and they haven't, for whatever reason, they haven't done that. Concern is the other thing that we got to get into, which is the Jair Alexander situation from Sunday. And it's been interesting to watch how that has played out because, and I've said this before, the David Bakhtiari situation thank you, Robbie. Yes, Bob Sugar. How did I forget that? Yes, thank you. The Jair Alexander situation, Gary Ellerson called it the Bakhtiari factor, which then Bakhtiari called him out on, which was kind of interesting to see. But the Bakhtiari thing led to so much speculation of he's not trying to come back. He's quitting. He got paid and now doesn't want to play anymore. Just all that ridiculous stuff, which has since been proven wrong, right? Like Bakhtiari gave an exclusive. Aaron Nagler had an exclusive with Bakhtiari talking about his knee in 2021, about how much fluid they had to drain. And then last year he plays 11 games. This year he plays the opener, gets injured, and everybody like just immediately assumes, well, Bakhtiari's not going to play if the game is on turf, which has been proven false. Bakhtiari missed then the next 2 games after that and was put on injured reserve, and then said they went in and had to fix some other stuff. So I think that has empowered way too many people to just openly speculate and question whether a player, like, to me, they're, except for in the NBA, because in the NBA, apparently that's normal practice. But to me, there's no more insulting analysis you can give than player could play is choosing not to. And some of that was starting to happen with Jair Alexander, to where people were just assuming that Alexander could have played and was choosing not to, and then was saying, well, he hates Joe Barry, or he hates this defense, or he's mad at this, or he's upset with that, or he just doesn't want to play. He got his money, so who cares anymore? Doesn't want to play. It's not that. But it led to the other side of that argument, where they said it's just injury related, to kind of dig their heels in on some stuff too. And they did that with the situation from Sunday, where Jair Alexander was not announced as a team captain and called the coin toss and almost screwed it up. Said, we want to kick, or I want our defense out there, is what Alexander said. He said, well, then they're lucky the official said, so you want to defer or something like that. Because if he just says kick, then Carolina gets to choose again in the second half and Green Bay loses a possession that way. I think for people to just say that, oh, that's nothing or who cares, I don't want to put words in Matt LaFleur's mouth, but post-game, I think it's fair to surmise he was not happy about it. Not saying he was overly upset about it, but he wasn't happy about it. And I think it's fair to not be happy about that. You weren't announced as a team captain. You walked out there, presumably without anybody knowing, and almost made a colossal mistake to give Carolina an extra possession that they, didn't need to have. I think it's fair to say there's something weird here. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to suggest that I do. And maybe it's just all really weird stuff that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. But I think to just say, oh no, it's just an injury, isn't far enough on the severity scale. Now, I do think Alexander has an injury that LaFleur has said is they miscalculated the severity. And Alexander said after the game was over that some guys with what he has check out for the season. Okay. And I have no reason not to believe that. But I think that's not severe enough on the how big of a deal is this whole Alexander thing. 2, he's quitting on the team because he hates Joe Barry and doesn't want to play for him. That's too far on the other end. The answer to me is probably somewhere in the middle. What does that mean? I don't know. I know it's been hinted at on the radio. Jason Wilde has talked about some stuff, again, openly on ESPN radio, so I'm not speculating when I'm saying this stuff. I think the hope, if you're the Packers, is that you get through the rest of this season, however far it goes. The hope you make the playoffs, win these next 2 games and make the playoffs, get some help along the way. Alexander, the defensive coordinator, gets fired, and Green Bay gets a new guy, and that kind of rejuvenates those guys. Because the reality, for the people to say like, oh, Alexander stinks now, or he's stunk ever since he got his contract, he was second team All-Pro last year. Like, he's still really good. Now, this year, he's been injured, played poorly when he has played, but has been playing injured. Like, I think you can just kind of chalk this up to a bit of a lost season for Alexander because of that shoulder injury and because of all the other stuff. And I don't know. I just think that Twitter has given people too much license to just say whatever the hell they want with no consequences. And that's frustrating for a lot of different reasons, just because, like, I mean, I know how hard a lot of these guys work to just sit back and entertain us. And Alexander's no exception to that rule. You know, and he's an interesting guy, no question about that. But I think to just act like he quit on the team because he couldn't play, I don't know what the reason for all of it was over the last 5 weeks. So I watched, and the other thing, him practicing every week in limited capacity, but not being able to play, that's a little odd too. Like I said, I think it's just odd. Call it odd. Don't know what it means. It's not nothing, but it's not everything to the point of like he's actively sabotaging the team and doesn't want to play. That's what I think at this point when it comes to Jai Alexander. Let's go to the other side of the ball. I think I've done enough of the doom and gloomer for the defense. Again, no redeeming quality. Rich Bisaccia, what the hell, by the way? The special teams is terrible. You got promoted last year. I'm not suggesting he needs to be fired, but his seat being warm next year, I certainly think is plausible. Look at how many guys they grabbed. Every safety they signed this year was with special teams in mind. They drafted guys with special teams in mind, and they're awful. With really, again, no real redeeming quality there either, because Keyshawn Nixon hasn't been the same from a year ago. The same true of, the kicking game. Anders Carlson's up and down. The field goal operation screwed something up on Sunday. I don't know, man. I don't know what to do with special teams. I'm starting to wonder if that's even, like, is there a law that says Green Bay can't be good on special teams? I don't know. Offense, however, there seems to be a law that says they always will have a quarterback. And I was not the first person on the Jordan Love bandwagon. I think that's been made pretty clear. By the middle of the season, when they were 3-6, I was thinking ahead to, like, hey, if I've said it a million times, if they were in position to draft Caleb Williams or Drake May, then they don't have a quarterback. Now, they're not going to be in position to draft those guys. And I think there's a lot of things that come with that, obviously. But since they're not going to be in position for that, obviously they're not picking a quarterback. But the other reason they're not picking a quarterback is because they got one. And Jordan Love is the man. And I mean, I'll tell you from my experience, having been around him, watching him play, watching the way he interacts with his teammates, watching the way he answers questions about stuff, and just kind of feeling that confidence that he brings to a room. Very easy kid to root for. No question about that. But none of those stories matter if you suck, right? Jordan Love certainly does not suck. Early in the season, things were not going well. And I think that is true because of Love and because of this group that was around him that is now starting to grow into its own. And the biggest reason now Soder brings it up, that I think I was probably already sold, but I am definitely sold now, because Jordan Love was playing. You guys remember the COVID, was 2021, where Green Bay played Arizona on a Thursday night. Devontae didn't play, and I don't think MVS played either. And they were missing a bunch of guys to where the receiving core is basically like Randall Cobb and Juwan Winfrey and like just practice squad dudes. Kind of what Jordan Love was doing for the second half on Sunday against Carolina, where Dontavion Wicks, you can make an argument as this team's best receiver right now, catches a touchdown and gets injured. Quick trip Wicks, as I like to call him, because he's always open. Jaden Reed, maybe another argument for their best receiver, didn't play. No question, their receiver with the highest ceiling, Christian Watson, did not play. Luke Musgrave did not play. And yeah, Bo Melton was called up from the practice squad and caught 4 passes. Romeo Doubs made a couple plays. Tucker Kraft made a couple. Like, they just kind of mixed and matched enough to score 33 points. And really, The only time that they didn't score was when they got in their own way. And those are the kinds of things that when you have a really good quarterback, the question with them is, can you carry a team? Now, I think that some of the dumbest things we do in this society is the way we talk about quarterbacks. Like Twitter.com is asking if Patrick Mahomes is really all that good. Yes, the 2-time MVP and 2-time Super Bowl champion and 2-time Super Bowl MVP. Is he really all that? The answer to that question, of course, is yes, he is. But you've seen it in the past, the ability that they have to kind of will elevate guys around him. Brady did it for years. And I'm not comparing Jordan Love to Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. But those guys do that. And I think Love did that on Sunday, albeit against Carolina. The question now, these next two teams they face, their defenses are pretty good. Chicago's defense we all thought was going to be terrible coming into the year, and they were for a while, but now they've gotten better. And they added Montez Sweat, who's been a menace for them. Like, they've got some good players there. And then Minnesota, they don't hand out coach of the year to assistant coaches, but if they did, Brian Flores would probably win it. Their defense has been pretty good on that side. They are banged up, though, on that side of the ball. On both sides of the ball, quite frankly. But this passing game has been far and away. Doesn't matter, the rest of the season. Sure, they're in position. You'd like to see them make the playoffs. Doesn't matter. Because when we started talking about this at the beginning of the season, the big question was, do they have a quarterback or not? And if you figure out the answer to that question, then the season's a win. Well, I think they've answered that question, and the season's a win because Jordan Love is this team's quarterback of the future. And I think that is a good situation for them to be in, both now and moving forward, which leads me to, I'm going to wrap here a little earlier tonight, but go into the other, this game now on Sunday against Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson is not going to play. I believe Kevin O'Connell pretty much confirmed that for Sunday night. So Justin Jefferson is back. Jordan Addison, we'll see if he can go. Even if he can, he's going to be hampered. Minnesota is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. They don't know who they're starting at quarterback. Like, this game is lining up to where Green Bay should win because, again, we don't know who Minnesota's quarterback is going to be. That should matter. And albeit he's awesome, but Justin Jefferson is the only dynamic pass catcher that they have left, and maybe that's all you need. The other reality is, who knows, what the minimum is, because DJ Chark just lit up Green Bay on Sunday. And no offense to DJ Chark, but he is not Justin Jefferson. He is not Jordan Addison. Like, that's the worry on there. The worry on the offense, this is a defense that held Green Bay to 10 points the last time these two teams played. And frankly, dominated the entire game from start to finish. Now, they'll be missing DJ Wanham. He will not play with a quadriceps injury. Danielle Hunter, though, one of the league leaders in sacks. He's awesome. Always has been. Harrison Smith is still a veteran presence that they have back there. Josh Metellus has been awesome. It's just going to be interesting to see how Green Bay does and navigates those things, because I think they're going to have to score more than you would think they should against Jaron Hall or Nick Mullins or John, whichever one of those three guys. Really, all three of those guys stink to win the game. What does that look like? I don't know. Minnesota's 2.5 point favorite right now. You're asking me on Tuesday, December 26, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. I think Green Bay wins by having the ball last. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's how. Minnesota's defense, I just talked about how they are good, but in the last couple of weeks, the Lions, they're a good offense, and the Lions scored with some relative ease against them. But Cincinnati's offense with Jake Browning, that's not Joe Burrow. Not by any stretch. And you saw what they did against the Steelers on Saturday night. It's interesting. That's right. Green Bay is playing playoff games right now. And if they win out, they have a chance. I think their chances rise to 95% if they win out. You just need Seattle or Los Angeles to lose one game, and that's it. And if Green Bay gets in, as it lines up right now, I think they would play Philadelphia. Philly or Detroit, I know that. And there's 2 games left to kind of cycle out who that's going to be too. But Dallas is another possibility. San Francisco is another possibility if you really want to get into some boogeyman stuff. But I think San Francisco's got a pretty good hold on that number 1 seed with the tiebreaker and everything like that. But I'm interested to see, how it works to get in. The big thing is they got to get in. And in order to do that, this game is essentially an elimination game. Green Bay's playoff chances drop to like 3% or something like that. If they lose the game, they can be eliminated altogether, depending on how the other games go with a loss on Sunday night. Green Bay has not won in US Bank Stadium with fans in the stands since 2019. That was the Zadarius Smith, 3 sacks, 5. He was just dominant from start to finish. I don't know that I've ever seen an individual defensive player's performance as good as that one in Green Bay. The only other one that comes to mind right off the top of my head is Charles Woodson's 2009 game against the Dallas Cowboys, where he had a strip sack, he had a pick in the end zone, he had another fumble. Like, he was just incredible the entire game. Those are the only 2. Now, Green Bay last year, 23-7. Game really wasn't all that close. The year prior, they lost on a field goal at the buzzer. Darnell Savage dropped what could have been a probably game-winning interception, or basically a game-winning interception. And then 2020 was the season opener, but there were no fans in the stands because that was the COVID year. So not exactly a place that Green Bay likes playing under Matt LaFleur. But, if a couple things break their way, one of Seattle or Los Angeles loses and Green Bay wins, then it's beat Chicago and you're in the playoffs. Beat a team that you always beat and you're in the playoffs. If I told you that was going to be the case before the season, I think you would have signed up for that. So enjoy that. We're out of time for this week. The next time we talk to you guys will be in 2024. Maybe Brendan and I will actually be able to get together in 2024 for something like that. You can follow him on Twitter at BrendanDZW. You can follow me. I'm at Jacob Westendorf. I write over at Packers Central. You can check out my stuff. I just had something published today, the top 10 storylines for the team in 2023. So dating all the way back to last year's final game against the Detroit Lions, all the way through this last weekend's performance. So let me know what 10 storylines you think were the top ones in there. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jacob Westendorf. I am always giving my opinions on various topics. And I'll be very excited for Monday, Michigan versus Alabama, college football playoff. So nobody cares what my opinion on that is. But if you followed me for any period of time, you know how I feel about that particular game. But the Packer-wise, we'll see you guys after Green Bay and Minnesota. Thanks. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your New Year's Eve. And we will see you next week.